The call for help wasn't even meant for us. It was a fluke, a broken cry bouncing through the stars, carried by ancient frequencies nobody used anymore. It came from a quiet planet named Trevelon. Peaceful, green, untouched by war. The kind of place poets write about, not soldiers. Trevelon's people were soft, gentle in every way. Skin that shimmered like water under moonlight. Voices that sounded like wind passing through trees. They didn't build weapons, didn't even have a word for invasion. So when the Koran Empire came, they didn't stand a chance. The Koran don't invade out of hate. They invade because it's easy. Their ships drop from orbit like vultures. Cities are turned to ash. The survivors are locked up, catalogued, and sold. Trevelon was just another notch on their belt. Another species stripped bare while the rest of the galaxy turned its head. But that last scream, that desperate signal, they launched it into deep space as everything burned around them. They probably didn't even think it would be heard. We heard it, not because we were looking. Number it hit a monitoring station near Saturn, picked up by a half-sleeping tech on the night shift. Pure chance. She almost ignored it, thinking it was interference. But she didn't. She flagged it, and within a day, the message had reached Earth. That was all it took. Humans don't let cries like that go unanswered. Maybe it's because we've screamed into the void ourselves too many times. Maybe we remember too well what it means to be ignored. The governments didn't hesitate. No council votes, no endless debate. Just silence. And then motion. 5 warships were mobilized, modified, loaded. Not with diplomats or scientists, with soldiers, marines, pilots, not peacekeepers, retaliators. They called it the Ares Vanguard. The mission was simple: respond with force. I stood on one of those ships when we dropped out of FTL above Trevelon. Below us, the planet was scarred black with smoke. Entire cities gone, farms torched, massive camps blinking with infrared, full of prisoners packed like animals. It hit hard. And then it hit deeper. Because those prisoners weren't humans. They didn't share our skin or shape or history. But their cries. Those were the same. The pleading, the fear, the helplessness, every human bone in our bodies recognized it. The Koran fleet in orbit was arrogant. They hailed us with laughter, mocked our design, our numbers, called us meatbags and mudwalkers. A species still chained to gravity, they sneered. They thought we came to negotiate. We didn't. We came to kill. The first barrage hit them mid-sentence. 2 cruisers gone before they could even return fire. The second wave tore through their defense grid like knives through silk. They scrambled, confused. They weren't used to being outgunned, especially not by humans. We didn't speak much during it. There wasn't time. All that mattered was keeping pressure, keeping the fire constant, letting them feel what it's like to be hunted. Then we dropped troops planet-side. The air was thick with smoke and static. Skies glowed red. Dropships burned through clouds and touched down in shattered fields. And we ran. Not walked. Ran into the fire. Into the ruins. The Quran had never fought humans on the ground before. They weren't ready. They expected soft targets, scared locals, not soldiers who moved like wolves in a pack, not armor reinforced by centuries of war, not rage. We didn't save Trevelon that day. We avenged it. And when the prisoners looked up, past the fire, past the broken sky, past the smoke, they saw us, covered in ash, drenched in sweat, but standing. Human. Not angels, not saviors, just a species that had heard a scream and answered it with thunder. The moment our boots hit Trevelon's surface, the war changed. We didn't land in formation or with clean precision. We came in hot, drop pods slamming into the ground like meteor strikes, gunships shrieking overhead, soldiers hitting dirt and moving before the dust even settled. Trevelon's air was thick with ash and rot. The sky was a bruised shade of red, pulsing with distant fire. You could hear the echo of plasma shots in the distance. The planet wasn't just occupied, it was bleeding. The Quran didn't expect us to go groundside. They thought we'd fight from orbit like cowards, send drones, negotiate terms. But we'd already studied them. We knew they controlled through fear, through visibility. You had to put human boots in front of enslaved eyes, let the victims see their chains cracking in real time. And so we landed right in the middle of a work camp. It wasn't a battle, it was a slaughter. They'd corralled thousands of Trevelyan's people into a place they called Processing Unit 17, just a polite name for forced labor and slow death. No fences, just perimeter towers armed with pulse cannons and automated drones. The Quran weren't expecting guests. They got us. We came from the air, grapple lines down the towers, shot the operators in their chairs before they even stood up. My squad moved like smoke, fast and merciless. One after another the towers fell. We cleared the camp in under 12 minutes. 12. And then we saw them. The locals. They were hiding in pits and shacks, skin dulled from starvation, eyes wide and terrified. They didn't know who we were. They thought we were just another kind of monster. One of them, a child, stepped forward first. Barely tall enough to reach my chest, wearing what looked like torn insulation wrapped around their shoulders. Big blue eyes full of confusion and pain. They looked up at me and said something. I didn't understand the words, but the meaning hit like a fist to the chest. Are we dying now? I knelt, took off my helmet, showed them my face. No, I whispered. Not today. That was when everything shifted. Word spread fast. We didn't need translators. Hope doesn't need a language. Camp after camp, they started rising. Trevelyan's people, too weak to walk, dragged themselves to the edges of the fences to watch us fight. For them. With no treaty, no reward, just fury. But not all humans were like us. 2 days into the ground assault, we intercepted a rogue transmission. Human voice, Eastern accent, a name we recognized from the blacklists. A mercenary group, earthborn, unaffiliated, selling supplies to the Quran. Ammo, weapons, armor mods, traitors. That was the first crack in the illusion that we were unified. Command wanted to stay focused. Primary objective is to break Quran control, they said. We'll deal with collaborators later. But some of us couldn't wait. One squad, callsign Hammerfall, went dark for 6 hours. When they came back, they didn't say a word. Just dropped crates at the outpost gates. Inside were Quran-marked rifles and human-coded shipment manifests. They had found the mercs and ended them. No trials, no hesitation. This was war, not a press conference. Every day we pushed further into the ruins. Quran resistance stiffened. They started using civilians as shields, bombing their own camps before we could reach them. We found one site, Processing Unit 42, where the walls were scorched black. No survivors, just ash and twisted metal. They'd rather erase what they couldn't control. So we hit back harder. Night raids, stealth drops behind their lines. We began to speak their language, violence, and we spoke it louder than they ever imagined. The turning point came when we captured one of their command officers, a high-ranking Quran general, tall, armored, bleeding from a leg wound. He spat blood on the ground when we pulled off his helmet. "You care too much," he growled. "You think pity makes you strong." We didn't respond, because deep down, we knew he was wrong. It wasn't pity that brought us here. It was rage, the kind that simmers when you've seen too much pain, the kind that explodes when no one else steps up, the kind that only humans, flawed and furious as we are, seem to understand. The Quran stopped underestimating us after the 3rd week. By then, half their orbital fleet was dust. Their ground forces were fractured, running guerrilla defense in shattered ruins. Their arrogance had cracked, and what seeped through was something new: fear, Not of our weapons, not even of our numbers. They were afraid because we didn't stop. Even when they torched towns full of civilians just to slow us down, even when they lured us into ambushes where half a unit never came back, we kept coming. They thought we'd lose momentum. They didn't understand that humans have a gift. When you break us, we get sharper. We took those losses and made them fuel. That third week, we set our sights on one of their strongholds, what they called a control node. Half fortress, half communication hub, dug deep into the northern mountain range. It pulsed with energy, defended by turrets, drones, and something new. Beasts. Bioengineered creatures the size of tanks, all teeth and muscle. The Terran had released them into the valleys like living siege weapons. They didn't scare us. They just made it more personal. The night before the assault, the camp was quiet. No gunfire, no briefing noise, just soldiers cleaning their rifles, some staring up at the alien stars, thinking of people they might never see again. You could feel it hanging in the air. This wasn't just another mission. This was the strike that would shift the war. We hit the fortress at dawn. Thunder rolled through the valley as our dropships screamed overhead, letting out waves of infantry and mech units. The mountains echoed with the sound of war, plasma fire, railgun blasts, the inhuman roars of those bio-creatures as they tore through rock and steel. It wasn't a clean fight. Our lines broke 3 times. We lost over 100 people in the first hour. The Terran were dug in deep, ready to die. And they fought like it. But so did we. One team pushed through the rear entrance, a ventilation shaft barely big enough for gear. They crawled through mud, blood, and boiling heat. They emerged inside the fortress, dropped half their squad to a trip mine, and still kept moving. They disabled the main comm relay with their last grenade, frying the Terran's planetary comms in one blinding burst. That's when everything shifted. The Terran panicked. With no contact to their orbiting remnants, they didn't know if reinforcements were coming. They didn't realize we'd already wiped most of their support out days ago. We breached their main gate with a seismic cannon. The doors split, and we poured in like fire through dry wood. The inside was worse than we expected. Prisoners used as slaves to maintain systems, living in pits under the floor. Some barely breathing, some already gone. That was the moment our orders broke. We were told to capture the command staff, to extract data, protocol. Instead, we killed them. Every last one. There was no glory in it, no celebration, just silence. A silence so deep it filled your head like pressure at the bottom of the sea. The Terran general, the one in charge of the control node, tried to surrender. Stepped out in full regalia, hands up, voice trembling through a translator. "Please," he said, "we surrender. We surrender." He was still speaking when a bullet tore through his skull. No one asked who pulled the trigger. Nobody needed to. We liberated the fortress, freed over 2,000 Trevelyan captives, fed them, gave them blankets. Some cried. Some stared like they didn't understand what safety meant anymore. That was the hardest part. Realizing we couldn't undo what had been done. Couldn't bring back the dead. Couldn't erase the scars etched into their minds and bodies. All we could do was stand between them and the darkness and make damn sure it never touched them again. Later that night, while the fortress still smoked and the wounded were being treated, one of the Trevelyan elders approached us. A woman, old by their standards. Her voice was brittle, her hands shaking. She looked at our faces, bloodied and sleepless, and said softly, "You're not like the others, the ones who watched." "We're not them," one of us replied. "We came because no one else would." She nodded slowly and placed a hand over her chest. "Then you are storm bearers, not saviors, not gods, just storms that broke the silence." Storm bearers. It stuck, and the war wasn't over. Not yet. But for the first time since Trevelyan screamed into the void, the silence had been broken. We didn't rest after the fortress fell. There was no time, no ceremony, no heroes, just dead to bury, wounded to carry, and questions that burned hotter than our weapons. The Terran had abandoned their outer posts in a rush, leaving behind tech, files, half-torched logs. We started digging through it all. At first it seemed like the usual: resource extraction, control grids, slave rotations. But deeper in their servers, encrypted behind military-grade firewalls, we found something else. Experimentation logs. They weren't just using Trevelyan's people for labor. They were testing on them, trying to engineer something, trying to break the biological limits of consciousness, neural stress injections, forced memory implants, sleep deprivation mixed with high-frequency torture loops. And worse, records of breeding programs. The Terran weren't just enslaving a planet. They were trying to remake it from the inside out. We brought in a tech team to crack the deeper layers. One of them threw up halfway through the files. The rest just stared, silent and pale. Whatever the Terran were building, it was hidden in something labeled Project Soilborn. No detailed specs, no visuals, just a location. Deep Basin 9. That name sent a chill through every soldier who read it. Because Deep Basin 9 wasn't on any map. The coordinates placed it far west, past the acid lakes, deep inside a mountain range wrapped in electrical storms and radiation spikes. No intel, no previous recon, just a blinking red dot in the middle of the void. Command hesitated. They wanted to wait, scan the area, plan. But we didn't. We already knew what was out there. Pain, suffering, another place where the cries had gone unheard. We mobilized a small team. Volunteers only. We didn't need many, just the ones who could move fast, think fast, and pull the trigger without asking permission. The journey took 3 days. We lost 2 transports in the storm. Electrical interference blew out their stabilizers, sent them spiraling into the canyons. The third one crash-landed half a click from the basin entrance. We limped the rest of the way on foot, dragging gear, patching wounds, walking through wind that could tear skin off bone. And then we saw it. Deep Basin 9 wasn't a base. It was a crater. Massive, artificial, hollowed out with precision. A hole in the world rimmed with scorched metal and black towers that pulsed with red light. And at its center, suspended in anti-gravity chains, was something we didn't have a name for, a machine, or a creature, or both. It pulsed, alive. Wires ran through it like veins, and inside, through the glass of its core, we saw them. Trevelyan's people, hundreds, thousands, strapped in, unconscious, being drained by tubes, kept alive in limbo, feeding the thing. We didn't know what it did. But we knew what it was made from. Lives. Souls. One of us muttered, "This isn't war. This is evil." And then the alarms went off. They knew we were there. The sky above the crater lit up as Terran dropships descended like wasps. Automated turrets rose from the crater rim, drones swarmed out from underground hatches, and on the ridge behind us, figures, humans, armored, armed, marked with no flags, mercenaries, sellouts. We'd been set up. One of them stepped forward, voice amplified through a cracked helmet. "Turn around," he said. "This isn't your fight anymore." He looked human, but whatever was left of his soul had rotted long ago. "We're taking that thing down," one of us shouted. The merc didn't blink. "You won't leave this crater alive?" Then someone fired. No one remembers who started it. But once the shooting began, there was no stopping it. The ridge exploded into chaos. The drones screamed down at us, their rotors slicing the wind. The ground lit up with gunfire, sparks, plasma trails. The mercs had better weapons, better gear. But they didn't have what we had. Rage, conviction, the unshakable belief that some things are worth dying for. We fought tooth and nail, bodies pressed to scorched metal, firing through pain and smoke. And somehow, we held. Long enough to get one of our demo teams inside the machine. They didn't come back. But 30 seconds after they breached its core, that pulsing heart stopped. The whole crater shuddered. The towers shorted out. The sky went dark. And one by one, the Trevelyan captives inside began to fall. Not screaming, not gasping, just finally. Resting. Free. The crater burned for 3 days. We stayed until the last fire died, until the last body was accounted for, friend and enemy alike. No celebration. No high fives. Just the numb weight of what we'd seen. What we'd done. Deep Basin 9 wasn't just a turning point. It was a wound, open and raw, seared into every soldier's memory like a brand. Only 16 of us walked out of that hell alive. 16. And even that number didn't feel real. The Trevelyan we rescued, those who survived Project Soilborn, were different. Some wouldn't speak. Others screamed when the wind changed direction. Their skin was pale, thin like rice paper, veins glowing faintly beneath. Whatever the Quran had done to them, it wasn't just physical. They'd tampered with their minds, their memories. There were whispers that some of them had been turned into information conduits, used to store encrypted data like living hard drives. Our medics did what they could. Our scientists tried to scan the damage. But no one knew how to fix a soul cracked wide open. Word spread, fast and ugly. The footage we leaked, of the machine, of the suspended bodies, of human mercenaries fighting for the Terran, sparked firestorms across the galactic net. Protests on Earth, outrage in the Federation Council, condemnation after condemnation. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion, but they were too late. We'd already seen the truth. The Federation wasn't just silent, they were complicit. We found comm logs hidden in the mercenary gear, contracts, signatures, dates that went back 6 months before the invasion even started. The Quran had paid for Trevelyan in advance, paid off officials to stay quiet, paid human contractors to provide logistics. They didn't invade blindly. They had maps, bioscans, weak points, because someone sold them everything. There was a saying among us before this war started, space is too big for secrets. Turns out space just makes them easier to bury. That night, our commander, an old vet with half his face replaced by combat tech, gathered us around a dying fire at the forward base. He looked at us like a man who'd seen the edge of something and didn't quite make it back whole. "We're not soldiers anymore," he said quietly. "Not in their eyes. We're weapons, disposable, dangerous, and the moment we stop being useful, they'll erase us." Someone asked what we do next. He didn't blink. "We finish this. No more mercy. No more pretending." And so we went dark. No more official updates. No more fleet movements shared with the Federation. We scrubbed our transponders, masked our signals, became ghosts. That's when the Terran hit back. They stopped trying to win the war conventionally. Instead, they started targeting hope, bombing refugee shelters, infecting water systems with bioweapons, using cloaked ships to raid liberated towns and take survivors back into the dark. It was terrorism, pure and cold. They didn't want to reclaim Trevelyan anymore. They wanted to ruin it. We responded in kind. Stealth teams infiltrated their last remaining command outposts. No prisoners, just explosives. We tracked their supply routes through the asteroid belts, blew them apart with gravity mines. We poisoned their food reserves, sabotaged their weapons caches. And every time they hit civilians, we hit 10 times harder. But the worst came one morning, just before sunrise, when a scout drone picked up something falling from orbit. Not a ship, a body, wrapped in synthetic fabric, burned from re-entry. It hit the ground outside our main forward post with a sound like thunder. It was human, one of ours. DNA confirmed it. a soldier who'd gone missing 2 weeks prior during a recon sweep. Inside the body cavity, they found a message capsule. Not digital, organic, carved into the bones. 3 words: "You are next." We buried him in silence. There was no ceremony, just clenched jaws and tearless stares, because we understood what it meant. The Quran had stopped trying to win. Now they were just trying to make us break. But they forgot the one thing that made humanity dangerous from the beginning. We don't break. We burn. And when we do, we take everything with us. We stopped playing by the rules, because there weren't any left. After the body fell from orbit, the mood shifted across every human camp on Trevelyan. No more speeches, no more command briefings, just quiet, focused, cold. You could feel it in the way people moved. Slower, tighter, like wolves about to pounce. Because now it wasn't just about saving a planet. It was about making sure the enemy forgot how to breathe. We knew where the Quran were hiding. We had their last bastion mapped out, somewhere deep beneath the polar ice cap, inside a buried fortress powered by a geothermal core. The place was called the Maw. Fitting name. According to stolen files, that was their fallback stronghold. Everything flowed through it. Intel, command, leadership. That's where the last high-born Quran generals were holed up, and probably the scientists behind Project Soilborn too. If we took the Maw, we didn't just end the war, we erased their future. But there was one problem. It wasn't just guarded. It was protected by an ancient planetary defense grid, older than the Quran themselves, built by some lost civilization, then reprogrammed. No one had cracked it. It could detect movement on a molecular level, trigger orbital strikes from old satellite weapons. Even the Federation never dared fly close. We didn't have time for caution, so we made a plan no sane strategist would approve. We called it Operation Iceheart. 2 teams, 1 ground, 1 orbital. Ground team would infiltrate through glacial fissures we found during a heat scan, barely wide enough to crawl through. The orbital team would simulate a fleet-wide retreat to draw Koran eyes toward the upper hemisphere. Meanwhile, our demolition units would do what humans do best: dig in, blow things up, and break everything sacred. I volunteered for ground. The fissures were a nightmare. Frozen tunnels filled with ancient gas pockets and shifting walls. We lost 1 man to a sudden collapse. Another had his legs crushed under a falling slab of ice. He told us to leave him. We didn't. We dragged him on a makeshift sled. He didn't scream once, just stared ahead and muttered, "Make it worth it." We reached the underside of the Maw 2 days later. And what we saw still haunts me. It wasn't just a fortress. It was a cathedral. Massive obsidian pillars carved with alien runes, glowing with red lines that pulsed like veins. Machines moved along the ceiling like spiders, organic tech breathing in and out. The entire place felt alive, like we were inside a throat about to swallow. There were no guards. Not at first. We snuck through corridors that smelled of copper and burning oil. Set charges along the primary support beams. Targeted power conduits. All silent. Until one of the Trevelyan survivors with us, Yaris, still weak but fierce, touched a console by accident. That's when the place woke up. Alarms howled. Doors slammed shut behind us. Then came the Blackguard. Elite Quran soldiers, 10 feet tall, armored like tanks, emotionless. They didn't speak. They didn't hesitate. They just moved in packs, slicing through anything that breathed. We fought in the dark, room by room, charging through blood-slick floors, dragging each other over bodies and fire. My rifle jammed twice. I used it like a club. We lost 5 people in less than 5 minutes. But we held long enough. The explosives went live. The floor beneath the Maw cracked. Steam hissed through the walls, and then from above, we heard the sky tear open. The orbital team had returned. They didn't simulate a retreat. They'd gone silent, rerouted the remaining fleet into high orbit, cloaked, and waited. When we triggered the beacon, they unleashed everything. The Quran never saw it coming. Kinetic rods slammed into the fortress from space. No explosions, just raw, earth-shattering force, enough to punch through rock, ice, metal, flesh, everything. The maw collapsed in on itself, one black tower at a time, folding like paper under a storm. We barely made it out. Half our team got caught in the quake. Others were thrown by shock waves that split the tunnels apart. I crawled out on my belly, coughing blood, dragging one of the Trevelyan kids on my back. Didn't stop until I saw stars again. From the ridge above the crater, I watched the last of the maw burn. And for the first time since this war began, I felt it. The silence, not the terrifying kind, not the heavy, hopeless kind, the kind that follows justice, the kind you earn. They didn't surrender. Even after the maw fell, even after their command chain was shattered, and their fleet reduced to drifting metal in orbit, the Quran didn't beg for mercy. They scattered. Like roaches when the lights come on, they disappeared into the cracks of Trevelyan, into caves, burned cities, abandoned mine shafts. Some posed as refugees, hiding among the very people they had once enslaved. Others just kept killing, not out of strategy but spite. No plan, no honor, just rage wrapped in alien skin. We knew the war was over. But the killing wasn't. That's the part they never tell you about victory. It doesn't come with a parade. It comes in waves, slow, quiet, and ugly. You spend the first week burying bodies, the next trying to figure out who's still sane, the rest watching your own people drink too much, sleep too little, and wonder what parts of themselves they left behind. We turned Trevelyan into a graveyard before it ever felt like a planet again. The cities we'd liberated were still husks. Survivors wandered like ghosts. Their homes were gone, their families erased. Some of them looked at us with awe, others with fear, some even with resentment, like they didn't know if we were saviors or just a different brand of destroyer. And to be honest, we didn't know either. We found the last Terran general hiding in the ruins of an old research dome. Half his face melted from plasma fire, one arm gone, and still trying to reactivate a broken distress beacon. He didn't speak much, just stared at us as we dragged him into the clearing, hands cuffed, blood leaking from the corner of his mouth. Someone asked him why? Why Trevelyan? Why the experiments? Why turn a peaceful planet into a laboratory of horrors? He looked up with what was left of his face and said, "Because no one would stop us." That was the truth. Cold, plain, not power, not revenge, not resources, just because they could. That night someone put a bullet in his head. No trial, no orders, no names. We left his body where it fell. A few days later, a delegation from the Galactic Federation arrived. Shiny uniforms, flawless ships, clean hands. They offered assistance, supplies, smiles. We didn't say a word. They walked through the ruins, nodding solemnly, taking notes like tourists visiting a tragedy. One of their envoys, a tall, slick diplomat with soft eyes, told us what we'd done was brave. Brave, as if courage had anything to do with what we'd become. We left them standing in the dust and went back to work, rebuilding what little could be rebuilt, setting up shelters, teaching Trevelyan's children how to use human tools, rewriting school lessons in languages that had no words for war until we came. Some of us stayed. Couldn't go back to Earth. Couldn't pretend anymore. Others were ordered home. They went back in body but not in soul. You can't unsee what we saw. You can't undo the taste of ash in your lungs. Trevelyan tried to heal. So did we. But there was a weight in the silence now. A presence. The knowledge that evil doesn't wear capes or banners. It hides in the spaces where no one looks. In bureaucracy, in backroom deals, in the long pause before anyone decides to care. And humanity? We answered the scream. We came like a storm, but storms don't fix the damage. They just clear the sky long enough for the truth to show. They held the ceremony at dawn, not because it was tradition, not because it was planned, just because the survivors said the light felt softer in the morning. Like Trevelyan itself was trying to be gentle for once. Like the planet remembered what peace was supposed to feel like. There were no speeches, no flags, no anthems, just rows of stones, hand-carved, uneven, marked with names in 3 languages: human, Trevelyan, and silence. A few soldiers stood in uniform. Some of us weren't wearing gear at all. No armor, no rifles, just our real faces. Tired, scarred, aged in weeks. Some cried, others couldn't. We all watched the sun rise through the smoke that still lingered in the air like a ghost that refused to leave. At the front of the crowd, one of the Trevelyan elders knelt beside a small stone, her fingers tracing the grooves of a name etched by hand. It wasn't her child, or her brother, or her friend. It was just a name, one of many, but she knelt there like she was touching the heart of her entire world. Maybe she was. I didn't know what to feel. The war was over. We'd won, whatever that meant. The Terran were gone. Their final outposts glassed, their bodies buried under craters of their own making. The Federation sent cleanup crews now, pretending to help, carefully avoiding the mess they'd once ignored. The mercenaries who sold us out were either dead or in hiding. No one spoke their names anymore. We didn't have to. We remembered them anyway. I walked the perimeter of the old forward base later that day. The buildings were being torn down, repurposed, barracks turned into schools, watchtowers stripped and rebuilt into wind turbines. The armory now housed food storage and communication tech. It was strange. Fighting to survive makes sense. It has rhythm, a reason. But surviving after the fight? That's the part no one trains you for. I passed by a group of Trevelyan children playing in the dirt with pieces of shattered drone metal. They turned the broken parts into toys, tiny creatures with wings and claws. One of them held up a piece of a plasma casing and called it a sun egg. They all laughed. A month ago, that same child wouldn't speak, wouldn't even lift their head. That sound, laughter, shook me harder than any explosion ever did. Back at the barracks, a young Marine named Soto approached me. Face still bruised from a fall in the crater, eyes raw. He'd lost his brother in the Deep Basin operation. Said he hadn't slept right since. "They're sending us home," he said. I nodded. "You going?" He hesitated, looked at the ground. "I don't know where that is anymore." That stuck with me, because that was the truth. Home wasn't Earth, not really. Not after everything. Not after Trevelyan. Home was where the scream had come from, and where we'd chosen to stay and answer it. I told him, "You'll know when you find it." That night the sky was clearer than it had been in weeks. No ash, no fire, just stars. Cold and distant and infinite. I lay on the ground outside what used to be the command post, staring up at that vast ceiling. I thought of everyone we lost, people I fought beside, people I barely knew, people whose names I'd only read in casualty reports. And I thought of the ones we couldn't save, the ones turned into power sources, the ones whose screams became data. We carried all of them now. Their weight didn't crush us, it defined us. Across the settlement, I saw one of the Trevelyan elders lighting a lantern, old tradition, a symbol of memory, light for the souls. It floated into the sky like a tiny flame trying to challenge the stars. And then more went up. Dozens, hundreds, every survivor lit one, every soldier too, no speeches, no fanfare, just the glow of sorrow and survival blending into the night. That's when it hit me. We didn't come here to be heroes. We didn't stay for medals. We came because someone screamed, and no one else came. We weren't built for silence. Humans don't endure in quiet. We endure in fire. We endure in storms. We endure with fists clenched and teeth bared and hearts wide open, even when they're breaking. That's what made the Terran afraid. Not our weapons, not our ships, but our refusal to walk away. They thought fear would paralyze us. They forgot we come from a world where we learned to run through it. To those who looked from the outside, this war was a mess. Brutal, bloody, unofficial, unrecorded in some of the Federation's ledgers, quietly erased in others. But to those who were here, it was something else. A reckoning. Trevelyan would never be the same. Neither would we. The scars ran too deep. But there was life here again. And that mattered. Before I left, I visited the last grave on the far end of the row. No name, just a helmet on a stick and a patch sewn into the soil. One of ours. One of many who never made it home because they'd decided this place was worth dying for. I knelt, pressed my palm into the dirt. Not praying, just being still. Stormbearers, the Trevelyan called us. Not saviors, not gods, just the thing that arrives when the silence has gone on too long. And when we leave echoes. Let the galaxy remember what happens when humanity answers a cry for help. Let them remember how we arrive, not in peace, not in silence, but like a storm.